Hello, Malcolm Brady from Dublin City University with you here today to talk about generic strategies. This is part of the choice stage of the PACE purpose analysis choice execution framework. Okay, so we're very much deciding what to do or what direction we want to go in as a firm. And this is Porter's model of generic strategies, where the firm can choose, it's his approach to how the firm gains competitive advantage and in a sense decides how it's going to compete in the marketplace. So it's very much part of Porter's positioning view of strategy. So you can see here on the top right corner of your screen, a small formula there, the profit formula of the firm. Profit, or pi as I have written it here, profit is equal to revenue minus cost. Okay, that's the basic profit identity, the basic formula governing firm life. Okay, so Porter's work really starts with this formula, and depending on whether you're emphasizing the revenue side or the cost side of this equation, you follow a cost leadership or a differentiation strategy as shown on the screen. Either way, you can improve your margins. That's his point. But he suggests you pick one side or the other. So if you're looking at differentiation, you're probably trying to achieve increase on the revenue side, and that will increase your margin. If you're emphasizing the cost structure, you're probably looking at cost leadership, and that's the C part, the C for cost in the revenue formula. So Porter's work starts with the revenue formula, and as I say, cost leadership is looking at the cost or the C side of that formula. If you reduce that, by definition, you increase your profit. The differentiation aspect is looking at the OR side, the revenue side. And if you increase your revenue, you can increase your margin. It's not quite as simple as that. We'll see in a few minutes, but that's essentially what he's saying. You pick one side, one expression or the other there. All right, so that gives us two essential ways of competing, either emphasizing you're keeping your costs low and looking to be the lowest cost producer or lowest cost deliver of value in the industry, hence the cost leader, or you differentiate in some way. You make yourself different in some way, and you try and increase your revenue by being different. So there's his two major generic strategies. Now he does look, you can see on the left-hand side he talks about competitive scope, and this is really whether you're targeting a broad element of the marketplace or only a narrow segment or a narrow niche of the marketplace. So if you break that competitive scope into broad and narrow, we get two further divisions. Obviously cost focus, if you're identifying yourself as cost leader, but for a narrow market, you're looking at cost focus. And if you're looking at differentiation, but with a narrow market, he labels it differentiation focus. But you can see it still comes from cost leadership and differentiation, just depends on the size of the market you're aiming at. So there are his four original generic strategies. Many people or many commentators and textbooks have added in a fifth one, which I've shown in the middle here, combination or hybrid or best cost, where you're trying to achieve some level of differentiation, but also trying to keep your costs low at the same time. And some firms are given as an example of this. Lexus is often given as the example where it uses, because Lexus is a division of Toyota, it uses the Toyota production system skills to keep its costs down, but yet it offers a premium product to the marketplace, a luxury type car. Okay, so it's trying to be differentiated and keep low cost at the same time. So some people argue you can do this. It wasn't part of Porter's original work, but many people, identified a number of companies that seem to fit this particular category. Now, I will point out that Porter does say that it does advise people to be aware or beware of becoming stuck in the middle. In other words, neither being properly differentiated nor really having low enough costs, and you end up stuck in the middle and not very profitable or with very little competitive advantage. So Porter doesn't advise it, but as I say, other people have introduced this extra dimension in the middle, hybrid, combination, or best cost. So I'm going to look a little bit more deeply at these cost leadership and differentiation now. So essentially cost leadership is where you're, as I mentioned already, you're the overall low cost provider in the industry. That's your aim, and that's where you're going to get your competitive advantage over other firms in the industry. Generally speaking, it's suggested when there's a very standard product or there's a common usage of a product. So there's not much difference between products anyway. So hence may make sense to be a cost leader anyway, or aim for that particular advantage if there's few ways to differentiate the product. Or if buyers are particularly price sensitive, then obviously keeping your cost down is critical. Or if they incur low switching costs, if they can switch between one supplier and another, or one firm and another, then again, cost leadership can be important to keep your prices down. Or if they're large and powerful, forcing you to keep your costs down. So those are the cases where it makes sense to follow a low cost provider strategy. Generally speaking, it's to do with your culture or your philosophy. It's not just simply to do with your product, but the whole organization has to be concerned about keeping costs under control. And generally speaking, you can tell cost leaders, if you look at their head offices, they are often pretty Spartan or pretty basic. The way they operate is always managing costs, always keeping an eye on costs. However, having said that, you have to be careful not to make the product too Spartan. Nobody wants to drive a car that has no glass in the windows, for example. So saving costs by eliminating glass isn't terribly useful. Okay, there are certain things that have to be there no matter what. So the competitive advantage is to do with either using, if your price is lower. I have a slide on this in a moment, so we'll see this graphically in a moment. You can keep your price at the same level as everybody else, but you gain a higher margin because you have lower costs. Or indeed, you could lower your price and still maintain your margins, but use the lower price to gain market share. This can be tricky. It doesn't always work out, but it's a possibility if you want to try and look at gaining market share by lowering your price. So here's the graphic. So you can see the average price line in blue there towards the top of the page, and the average cost is the dotted line, and that's what most people are producing at. Now you're the cost leader, the low cost operator, so you have a lower cost than everybody else. So you can see your cost line is the solid line beneath. So you can see you have that extra margin. Everybody else's margin is shown. The competitor profit margin is shown there to the left, and the cost leader's profit margin is shown to the right. And you can see it's larger than the other. So you have that extra profit margin. So hence you can use that extra profits that gives you extra cash that you can use to build the firm, to grow the firm, or to do whatever you wish to do with that extra cash. Okay, but you have it at your disposal. Similarly, as I mentioned, you could actually reduce your average price down. You reduce your price below the average price, and you can still maintain your margin, but because your costs are lower, but gaining market share because you have that lower price. So that's the cost leadership approach. An example here, well-known cost leader in our neck of the woods here in Ireland is Ryanair. And you can see actually this email received in 2014, because there was a point where they were the obvious cost leader, but they were beginning to get a lot of complaints about their customer service. And it was seen to be almost too Spartan in the area of customer service. So even though they had lower prices and so on, people didn't like the customer service, and they became aware of that. And you can see from this letter there, I'll just read out the first relevant sentence from the first paragraph there. This year we are working hard to improve our customer service to bring you and your family an easier to book website, a second carry-on bag, and various other things there. But essentially they recognized their issue about customer services and they had to work on that. Obviously that raised the cost a little bit, but they had been seen as too Spartan, so you have to be careful not to be too Spartan. But Ryanair in general is a very good example of cost leadership in action. So how do you achieve it? Well, Porter suggests you go to your value chain and you look at the activities in your value chain, and indeed in your supplier's value chain, or indeed your distributors, or even the ultimate buyer, the consumer value chain. And you can find ways in that chain to keep costs down. And he suggests either generally controlling it in a sort of activity by activity, or reconfiguring the entire chain. So I look at some examples of these. Controlling it is essentially performing the activities better or cheaper than competitors. So doing things differently to competitors, but in a way that makes that gives you value. This is one of the key components of Porter's positioning approach to competitive advantage, performing activities differently to competitors or performing different activities. Optimizing the linkage between the activities. So it's not just the activities themselves, but it's the linkages between. He talked about profit pools in his value chain concept. So it's looking at the profit pools and seeing, what ways you can increase the profit pools. So you can see in the little graphic there, in the fast service restaurant, it's taking the order, you can optimize that. Cooking the burger, whatever it is, you can optimize that. But you also have to optimize the linkage between the order takers and the order providers and then the service people. Okay, so it's not just the activities themselves, but the linkages between these two things. And generally speaking, in fast food environments, they have those down to a fine art. So you can examine costs. We talked about economies of scale and experience effects before. So you can look to see, are there ways of gaining economies of scale? Scheduling longer production runs, for example, might give you an economy of scale. In experience effect, making sure that you gain that experience by applying it back into the business. Or executional costs, improved utilization of production capacity. For example, putting up a drive-through lane so you can serve customers in their cars and also customers who are coming into the fast food outlet. So that gives you an extra channel with the same resources, but an extra channel. So that's improved utilization. Okay. You can see here the other example in the middle there is passing some of the activities on to the customers. So the ordering, the selection, all of that activity is passed to the customer. So you don't have a customer service person, an order taker, waiting there for the customer to make the customer's mind up. That activity is passed on to the customer. So controlling the value chain and then reconfiguring the value chain. This is more radical. This is looking at the whole value chain and entirely reorganizing it or changing it. So looking at the activities taking place, removing non-value activities, simplifying, standardizing. A very good example of this is travel. Not that long ago. It's a good while ago now, but again, not that long ago, you had to go to a travel agent to make a booking. They gave you a 5-part paper ticket. You had to then go, when you're traveling, to a checkout counter and check in. That took an extra length of time. You had to arrive at the airport earlier to do that. They retyped a lot of the information that was given on the ticket anyway. They took one slip of the ticket. You kept the remainder and you gave another slip to each carrier as you went on your journey if you had multiple legs of the journey. And all of that now is completely gone. We now get we book online and we get a code, CJ89B7, for example, and that contains all your data and all of your travel arrangements. And you simply give that code. You can check in automatically online now yourself. So all of that is entirely simplified. So that whole value chain is completely changed. And it involved obviously cooperation between airlines and airports. So there's a lot of work that took place before that actually went into place, but it's now there and we all benefit from it. Relocating activities to lower cost areas or to be closer to a buyer or closer to a supplier is a way of altering the value chain. We've seen Ireland here benefits from, you can see here, benefited from a lot of US companies moving their production to Ireland to benefit from low-cost labour. And when labour increased in price in Ireland, many of those moved on then to the Far East. So that's a reconfiguring. It's a major change. And then internet, lots of opportunities there. I already mentioned one, but we're now seeing in current times lots and lots of new ways of reorganizing your value chain by using internet capability. Differentiation then, here now you're providing some product or service that's unique, something special about your product or service. Obviously, it has to be special in a way that's valuable to customers, otherwise they're not going to pay any extra value for it, any extra price for that extra value. And you also have to be careful not to dilute the brand to over-differentiate, because then your brand gets spread over too many products and some may tarnish others. So it's useful when buyers' needs are diverse. Watches, lots of people like different kinds of watches and jewelry, so there's lots of different differentiation taking place there. Even something as simple as chocolate bars. Again, lots of differentiated products are there because we like our chocolate in different ways. Sticks, bars, tablets, loose, or in boxes of unique single item chocolates. Okay, the price premium cannot be too large. You have to be careful not to overprice your differentiation. So that will take a little bit of work sometimes to work out what the price premium, what the market will accept. And you have to maintain close proximity and cost. Offering a premium product, but at huge cost yourself, will reduce your competitive advantage, will reduce your margins. So again, you have to be careful there. And then clearly signal the added value. If it is a premium product or a differentiated product, you need to tell people about it. They may not necessarily know. Back to the airlines here again, there's a terrific ad with Jennifer Aniston for Emirates, which I think really gets across the message that Emirates provide a different type of service to other airlines, and they do that very effectively. And then a definition here by Johnson: differentiation involves uniqueness along some dimension that is sufficiently valued by the customer to allow a price premium. So that pretty well summarizes what I've been saying. So again, how to achieve, sorry, we'll have the graphic first and then how to achieve it. Here we see the average price in dotted line here, and the average cost in the industry here. Okay, the dotted line here. Now your differentiator obviously is providing some extra value to the customer, and therefore charges some extra premium for that value. So you can see the premium up here. Sorry, my little arrow is lost. So the premium is the full line above the average price. And it costs more, generally speaking, in Porter's world of differentiation, in Porter's view of differentiation, because you're providing some extra value, typically it'll cost you something extra to provide that. So your costs are higher than average as well. So clearly with differentiation, it depends on how much your price is above average versus how much your costs are above average, as to whether you make extra profit margin or indeed make less of a margin than the other industry suppliers or the other firms in the industry. So it's a bit tricky. You have two things to watch as a differentiator. So you have to be careful that it can be harder to get right than low-cost operator. Okay, so just be careful of that. But you can see there what's happening. You're trying to get an extra margin on your price, and that is more than the extra margin on your costs, so that your overall profit margin is higher than average, and that gives you your competitive advantage. So how to create it? Some points here from Porter's work. Obviously, it's back to the value chain here again. So somewhere in the value chain, you're adding extra value. So you can reduce the cost of the buyers by carrying out some buyer activities. In this case, say the merchandising activity, Coca-Cola carry out that activity for the retailers, say, who are, let's say, their buyers, or certainly they're the buyer of the they're in the supply chain, and they buy the product from Coca-Cola. So to them, merchandising can be a valuable activity that's carried out by Coca-Cola, and it doesn't need to be carried out by them. So it can give an advantage to Coca-Cola there. Just a simple way of getting an advantage. Similarly, in the other graphic there about the roof trusses there, the supplier of timber can actually, rather than supplying planks of wood that have to be fabricated into roofs on site, you can prefabricate these trusses and just deliver them prefabricated to builders, who then just need a crane to drop them into place on the roofs of the houses. So it's much simpler, much quicker for builders, and those can be manufactured to a higher spec in a factory type environment anyway than they were on site. So almost all construction has moved this way. You see very few old traditional style roofs being built. They're nearly all these roof trusses now. You can raise buyer performance. The Dyson here, they claim they have extra vacuum power and easier to clean than standard Hoovers or standard vacuum cleaners. So again, that's a way of differentiating through this extra performance, or increasing buyer satisfaction in some way or other. And this is typically how we think of differentiation when it first comes to our mind. It's some kind of prestige product or some kind of extra safety or something extra that's offered. Safety, for example, Volvo trade on being differentiated on the basis of their safety features. Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and so on trade on their basis of adding prestige. The owners get a prestige value, a social value out of having that product. Or speed, the lots of different cars there offer extra speed that a buyer might be interested in, and that's a way of differentiating a car, okay, from the standard, let's call it family saloon type car. So they're all different ways of creating differentiation. Um, Here's just a simple example. If you take the humble spud, these are all the activities in the value chain. You dig it, you sort it, you wash it, you peel it, and then you can do different sorts of things: chip it, freeze it, manufacture it into crisps or into waffles or whatever. And as you go along that value chain of activities, you can charge extra for having carried out that activity on behalf of the buyer. So ordinary household might be happy enough just to have washed potatoes. However, restaurants and so on might like them chipped and peeled, or peeled and whole. And that is an extra, that's an activity carried out for them, for which presumably the potato suppliers charge some extra price. And then if you go to chips and crisps and waffles, they can add a huge amount of extra value. If you look at the per kilo cost of crisps compared to the per kilo cost of washed potatoes, there's a huge difference. I've given the example below with mushrooms. Simply slicing the mushrooms allows the retailer to sell them for 2.5 times the price. So simply slicing the mushrooms, nothing more. You increase the price by 2.5%, or sorry, 2.5 times, 250%. It's a very simple way of differentiating your product and adding value. Focus then is the final element of Porter's work. So we saw already it can be focused in terms of cost or focused in terms of differentiation. And I'm using the hotel market here to provide examples. So focused on low cost, for example, lots of hotel chains now, Jury's Inn, for example, would be one. Many of the French chains, Formule 1 and so on, provide a very basic service at a much lower cost to the hotel provider, usually very staffed very little, sometimes not staffed at all. You simply check in with your credit card, and then there's a cleaner comes around the following morning and tidies up. So they really minimized staff, minimized the ancillary benefits, no lounge, no bar, no restaurant, and so on. Okay. So that's a way of focusing, but they provide the basic bed and sometimes breakfast. Differentiation, on the other hand, then you're meeting the needs of a segment that requires something different to the standard market. So the hotel sector, the castle hotels provide that extra status type or service type benefit to customers, and usually charge for it. Or the spa hotels provide as a spa facilities, and again will charge for that. Again, just watch out for new entrants if the segment becomes very attractive. For example, the spa hotels, at the end of the day, it was relatively easy to imitate. It took, when the hotel saw that this was working, they added in their spa or their leisure facilities. Might have taken 6 months to a year to build them and put them in place, but generally speaking, when they saw that it was working and necessary, they added them in. So that wasn't sustainable for the spa hotels in the long run. For example, a hotel with a golf course could be more sustainable. Very hard for a hotel to add a golf course to it unless you happen to have a lot of land available nearby. Okay, and watch out for consumer preference change. If people get fed up at spas or get fed up with playing golf, your advantages can be eliminated. So again, focus. All right, that's our 3 generic strategies: low cost or cost leadership, differentiation, and then either focus based on low cost or focus based on differentiation. Thank you.